Welcome back to Jack and Rex Tales. The coffee mug slipped from Claire's hands at 6:43 in the morning, and before it even hit the floor, she was already apologizing. It hadn't broken. It had landed on the rubber mat behind the counter and simply rolled against the baseboard, unharmed, leaving nothing behind but the soft sound of ceramic on rubber. A nothing moment. The kind of accident that happens in every kitchen, in every diner, in every small town in America a dozen times a day. But Claire was already saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," her voice dropping fast and low, her hands raised slightly at her sides in the unconscious posture of someone who has learned that small mistakes have large consequences. Her eyes moved to the back hallway before she looked at anything else. The hallway was empty. Dorothy hadn't heard. Claire stood very still for a moment, breathing carefully, waiting for footsteps that didn't come. Then she bent down, picked up the mug, set it on the counter, and went back to work. Her hands were shaking. She did not acknowledge that her hands were shaking. This was 6:43 on a Tuesday morning in December. This was not a bad day. This was just a day. This was every day. And Claire Rowland had learned, across more years than she allowed herself to count, that the distance between a day like this and a bad day was nothing more than the creak of a floorboard and the jingle of a keyring and the particular heaviness of footsteps coming down a back hallway with purpose. She was 39 years old. She wore long sleeves. She smiled when spoken to and apologized when she hadn't done anything wrong, and kept her hair pulled back too tightly because Dorothy had said once, 4 years ago, that loose hair looked sloppy, and Claire had not worn her hair loose since. Not once, in 4 years. This is what fear looks like when it has been living inside a person long enough to stop screaming and start whispering. This is what it looks like when it becomes the air a person breathes. Invisible, constant, so familiar that the person themselves has stopped recognizing it as fear and started calling it simply life. Claire called it life. She did not yet know another word for it. Jack Thompson pulled into the gravel lot at 6:51, and Rex was already standing on the passenger seat before the truck stopped moving. Not excited, not eager, alert, in the way that means something specific to anyone who has ever worked alongside a trained military dog. Ears fully forward, body weight shifted slightly toward the front. Eyes locked on the diner's entrance with the particular quality of attention that has nothing to do with curiosity and everything to do with assessment. Jack sat with the engine off and watched his dog. He had learned, across 22 years in the United States Army, to trust Rex's attention more than most men's words. Rex had no politics. Rex had no capacity for self-deception, no social pressure to pretend something was fine when it wasn't. When Rex looked at something that way, still, focused, reading, there was something there worth reading. "What is it?" Jack said quietly. Rex didn't look at him. Kept his eyes on the door. Jack looked at the diner, looked at his dog, looked at the diner again. An old wooden building wrapped in a northern winter, pine trees dark against a white sky, the sign above the entrance creaking faintly in the cold. Nothing visible, nothing obvious, but Rex's body did not lie. Jack poured coffee from his thermos and settled back in his seat. "All right," he said softly. "We'll wait." He was a patient man. The Army had made him patient in the way that long and serious experience makes a person patient. Not passive, not indifferent, but deeply, deliberately still. Capable of waiting for the truth to show itself without forcing it. So he waited. And slowly, morning by morning, the truth began to show itself. It was the small things that told the real story. The way Claire's shoulders rose a quarter inch every single time the back door opened, a movement so small and so automatic that she herself likely didn't know she was doing it. The way she always positioned herself with the counter at her back when Dorothy was in the room, putting something solid between herself and open space. The way she laughed easily with customers, genuinely, warmly, her whole face changing, and then the laughter vanished like a light switched off the instant Dorothy's voice came from the kitchen. Jack had seen this before. Not here, not in a diner in a small American town. In other places, in other countries, in villages where women moved through their own homes like guests who understood they could be removed at any moment. He had sat across tables from women like Claire in other parts of the world and felt a rage so clean and so useless that it had nowhere to go except inward, where it settled and hardened and stayed. He had not expected to find it here. Rex had known before Jack did. Rex always chose the stool closest to wherever Claire was working, not intrusively, not demanding her attention, just near. And Claire, without ever being asked, began bringing him a bowl of water, began speaking to him quietly when the diner was slow and Dorothy was in the back. Not nonsense, not the soft sounds people make to animals when they want a reaction. Real words, full sentences. The kind of words you speak when you finally have a listener who cannot repeat anything and cannot judge anything and will not use what you say against you later. Jack pretended not to hear, but he heard. And what he heard was a woman speaking freely for the first time in a very long time, hesitant and wondering at her own voice, the way a person sounds when they have been silent so long that the sound of themselves has become unfamiliar. The night Jack understood the full weight of it was a Thursday in late January. He was walking Rex along the road behind the diner, a route they had fallen into by habit, or perhaps by something more deliberate than habit, though Jack had not admitted that to himself yet, when Rex stopped and turned toward the building. The back door was slightly open. A thin line of kitchen light fell onto the snow. From inside came Dorothy's voice. Jack did not move. Dorothy's voice was low, controlled, the particular control of someone who has learned that volume draws attention and prefers to do their damage quietly. He could not hear every word. He didn't need to. He had heard that register before, in interrogation rooms, in the suffocating small spaces where power demonstrates itself to remind someone of their place. Then Claire's voice, thin, careful, shaped entirely around not making anything worse. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'll fix it. Please, I'll fix it." A crash, something off a shelf, then silence, then Claire again, still smaller, still apologizing. The apology itself now its own kind of wound. The sound of a person who has said "I'm sorry" so many times and in so many necessary moments that the words have become a reflex, like breathing, like blinking, like the way her shoulders rose when a door opened. Rex trembled against Jack's leg, not in fear, in restraint, in the tremendous controlled effort of an animal who understood that his job in this moment was to be still, even though every single thing inside him said otherwise. Jack's hand found the back of Rex's neck. "Steady," he said. Just the word, just the one word. He stood in the frozen dark for a long time after the voices went quiet. He stood there until the light in the back window went dark and the back door closed and the parking lot held only silence and cold. Then he walked home. He sat at his kitchen table until 2 in the morning. Rex lay on the floor with his chin resting on Jack's boot, and Jack sat in the quiet and looked at nothing and understood everything and thought about every woman he had not been able to help in every place he had ever been, and he felt the full weight of all of it pressing on his chest like something that had been waiting patiently for this exact moment to arrive. He was 50 years old. He was tired in ways that had nothing to do with sleep. He had come to this town specifically to stop carrying things, to set down the weight and the purpose and the vigilance and simply rest. He looked down at Rex. Rex looked back at him with amber eyes that held, as they always did, a patience and a loyalty so complete and so unconditional that it made the concept of giving up feel not just wrong, but genuinely impossible. Jack looked away first. He reached for a notepad, and he began to write down what he needed to find out. The details came quietly through county records and one careful conversation with a local attorney who asked no unnecessary questions. Dorothy's debt was not hidden. It was simply unexamined, the way uncomfortable truths in small towns are often left unexamined because looking at them directly requires someone to do something about them. The diner's mortgage was failing. The private lender had extended patience beyond its natural limit. Dorothy's position was weaker than she had allowed anyone to see because her power depended entirely on the people around her believing she was immovable. She was not immovable. Jack made an offer, a clean offer, a fair number on paper with no audience and no drama, presented through the attorney, leaving Dorothy no room to perform and no ground on which to build a counter-narrative. She accepted because she had no real alternative, and because the alternative had been made quietly but completely clear. The transfer was finalized on a Wednesday. That evening, Jack drove to the diner after close. Claire was alone, wiping down the counter in the low light, chairs already up on the tables, the old building settling against the cold outside. She looked up when he came in, and her face arranged itself automatically, the careful, practiced expression she wore for every person who was not Dorothy. Polite, ready, slightly diminished. Jack sat down at the counter. He told her plainly, the diner was his now. Dorothy held no authority here, no claim. Claire's position was hers if she chose to keep it. Real wages, a real contract, real hours that ended when they were supposed to end. And if she wanted to leave, that was equally and completely her right. Today, tomorrow, whenever she decided. He slid a folded paper across the counter. Housing advocate in town, and a room above the florist on Elm, month to month already available. I called this morning. Claire stared at the paper. She did not pick it up. "What do you want?" she asked. Her voice was very quiet. "Nothing," Jack said. The word landed on her like a physical thing. She looked up at him, and he could see her trying to find the catch, the angle, the thing underneath the thing. Because in her experience, there was always something underneath the thing. There was always a cost. There was always a version of nothing that turned out to mean something she would spend a long time paying for. "People always want something," she whispered. "I know," Jack said. "I'm sorry that's been true for you." Rex stood from his place beside Jack's stool. He walked the 3 steps to Claire's side of the counter, and he pressed the full, broad weight of his head against her hands, those hands that were shaking again, the way they had shaken over a dropped coffee mug that hadn't even broken, on a morning that felt like a lifetime ago now. And Claire broke. Not loudly. There was no collapse, no dramatic sound, just tears falling straight down, silent as snow falling on snow. Her entire body releasing something that had been held so long and so tightly that letting it go felt almost like grief. She bent forward over Rex's head, and her shoulders, those shoulders that had spent years raised toward her ears, braced, waiting, never fully down, dropped completely for the first time. She wept into his fur and said, "I'm sorry." And Jack said, "For what?" And she said, "For staying, for letting it go on, for being so stupid, for not leaving sooner." "Claire," Jack's voice was quiet and final. "Surviving is not something you apologize for. You stayed alive. That is not weakness. That is the hardest thing there is." She looked up at him. Her face was completely open. No performance, no careful arrangement, just a human face, raw and exhausted, and underneath all of it, still somehow intact. Still there, still whole, still her. Rex licked her hand once. Jack turned and looked at the wall for a long moment. He was 50 years old, and he had survived things that had no clean names, and he had promised himself he would not cry in a diner in a small northern town. He was not entirely successful. The night Claire left, her whole life fit inside a canvas bag. Dorothy stood in the back doorway. Not blocking, just present. The last exercise of a control that no longer had any legal ground beneath it. Her face was tight. Her eyes were the eyes of someone who has confused ownership with love for so long that losing one feels exactly like losing the other. "Everything you are," Dorothy said, "I made." Claire stopped walking. She stood still for a count of 5. Then she turned and looked at Dorothy, fully, directly, for the first time in longer than she could remember, and something moved across her face that was not anger, and was not forgiveness, and was not fear. It was simply done. She turned away and walked out into the frozen night without a word. Rex lay down in the doorway behind her, facing inward, enormous and still, and did not move until Jack gave the word. Nobody called Claire back. Healing does not arrive like weather. It arrives like this: a Tuesday when you choose something small, what to eat, which coat to wear, whether to take the long way home, and you stand there afterward waiting for a consequence that never comes. It arrives like a Thursday laugh, real and unguarded, and you notice only afterward that you didn't cover your mouth. It arrives like a night of full sleep and a morning where the first feeling is not dread. Claire's shoulders came down over months. She enrolled in evening classes. She worked weekends at the library and recommended books to strangers with quiet confidence. She made decisions, small ones, then larger ones, without rehearsing apologies in advance. Rex slept through full nights at the diner now, stretched fully on his side, paws loose, breathing slow and even. Jack had known, for a long time, that a dog only sleeps like that in a place that is truly safe. 8 months after she walked out that door, Claire passed her first college examination. She came into the diner on a bright March morning holding the paper, her face carrying a light that made her look like someone Jack was meeting for the first time and somehow had always known. "I passed," she said. Jack nodded slowly. "I know you did." "I didn't know," she said. "I really didn't think I could." She knelt beside Rex and held him the way a person holds something real after a long time of holding nothing. Arms around his neck, face pressed into his fur, completely unguarded, completely herself. Jack turned toward the window. The March light was doing something generous to the snow on the pine trees outside, turning it gold at the edges, the kind of light that makes even cold things look like they are warming from the inside. He thought about why he had come to this town. He had come for quiet, for no more orders, for mornings without wait. He had found something he hadn't known he was looking for. He had found one last reason to show up. A year later, a woman named Lena walked into the diner on a Friday afternoon and stood just inside the door with the stillness of someone reading a room before committing to it. Her hands were clasped. Her eyes moved carefully. Claire came around the counter without rushing, without making the moment into more than it needed to be. She simply moved close enough to be present and stayed there. "Someone told me," Lena said quietly, "that this is the place that doesn't hurt." Rex crossed the diner floor and sat down at her feet. Claire looked at Jack. Jack looked at his dog. And in the warmth of a small diner on a winter afternoon, with coffee steaming and light falling soft through old windows, what had begun with one man's choice not to look away had grown into something neither of them had designed and both of them recognized. Some things don't need a name. They just need to keep going. Real courage is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with sirens or speeches. Sometimes it is a man who stays in a cold truck and pays attention when everyone else has found it easier not to. Sometimes it is a dog who plants his paws and refuses to move forward because something in the air is wrong. Sometimes it is a woman who picks up a small canvas bag and walks through a door and does not look back. And sometimes courage is simply the decision, made alone, in the dark, at a kitchen table at 2 in the morning, to see someone, truly see them, when the rest of the world has decided that looking away is easier. Claire once believed she stayed because she was weak. Now she knows she stayed because she couldn't yet see the door. And when she finally could, there was a dog lying in the threshold, guarding her back, facing everything she was leaving behind so she could walk forward without looking over her shoulder for the very first time. If this story reached something inside you, if it reminded you that paying attention is its own form of courage, that showing up quietly for someone can change the entire direction of their life, then you already understand what this channel is about. Subscribe to Jack and Rex Tales, not because we ask you to, but because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear these stories. Someone who has forgotten that they matter. Someone who needs to be reminded that loyalty still exists, that kindness still shows up, that one person choosing not to look away can change everything. Share this with someone who needs it tonight, and come back, because the stories aren't finished yet. Neither are we.